Now, just a few minutes ago, we told you about the elite U.S. Special Forces team known as the Navy SEALs. Well, joining me now to talk more about the SEALs and the role U.S. Special Forces teams is Cedric Leighton, a retired U.S. Air Force colonel and former Deputy Director of the National Security Agency. Thanks for joining us. We saw in that report just a few minutes ago the use of Navy SEALs and other special forces, and that seems to be the preferred method now for America to take on its enemies, rather than conventional wars like we saw in Iraq or Afghanistan. Why the change in tactics?
Well, I think it depends on the situation, Anand, and here's why the change in tactics. The use of SEAL Team 6 and other Special Forces units from the SEALs, Air Force Special Operations units, Army Special Operations units is all dependent on the specific end that one is trying to achieve. If you don't want to get into a long-term war, you tend to try to want to use Special Operations Forces if you can. The operations that we saw in Libya and in Somalia were operations that were specifically focused on getting one particular individual or maybe a group of individuals, possibly in the Somalia case. So that's why you tend to pick units like that as opposed to conventional forces.
Right, it's a short, sharp attack that takes place and someone is captured. But when one looks at it in the bigger picture, does it achieve the big aim of the United States? What about the long-term goal of the United States?
Well, it depends. If your goal is only a short-term one, i.e. get that particular individual, get a Libby or somebody like that, then what you end up doing is you end up trying to use the Special Operations Forces. If you have a broader goal of influencing populations and of making a difference in a particular region of the world, then Special Operations Forces can be part of the picture, but they may not necessarily be the only part or even the necessary part in order to achieve those ends. So it really depends on the kinds of goals that you have, the kinds of strategy that you want to unveil, and the kinds of things that you want to do in order to achieve that strategy.
Okay. Now, in the Somalia operation, the Special Forces had to withdraw without actually capturing their target. In that instance, do you think the Pentagon or whoever conducted that operation at that time would have considered the use of, say, a drone strike?
Oh, I think the drone strikes were always a possibility. They're part of the weapon systems that are used for these kinds of missions. And so in the case of the Somalia raid, they believed that they could probably better achieve their mission using Special Operations Forces. And it really depends on the type of intelligence that they have. If they have very specific intelligence in advance, then a drone strike may be the preferred option. Again, it depends on the nature of the intelligence. But then if you have a less specific piece or less granular type of intelligence, then you would go with Special Operations Forces because they can augment the intelligence that they see, that they've heard, by actually going in and looking for themselves, doing their own reconnaissance while they're engaged in the operation, and then that makes a difference because they can pivot to the new situation, whatever that new situation may be, and that makes them sometimes preferable to use as opposed to drone strikes.
Okay, Cedric, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks a lot for joining us.
My pleasure, Anand. Thank you for having me.